From a very young age, the boy had always felt something special whenever he touched the violin. It wasn't something that many kids in his neighborhood played. In fact, very few even knew what a violin was. But for him, the small wooden instrument with its 4 strings and graceful shape was like a magic key to another world, a world where he could express feelings he didn't know how to say with words. He lived in a part of the city where life was often hard. There were sirens shouting and the constant noise of busy streets. Sometimes the neighborhood felt rough and unforgiving. People expected him to grow up facing all sorts of problems, maybe getting into trouble, maybe giving up on dreams too big for a place like theirs. But the violin was different. When he played, the noise outside seemed to fade away and he could feel calm and free. His first violin was old and worn. It wasn't new or shiny like the ones he saw on TV or in pictures. It had scratches on the wood and some strings that didn't sound perfect. The bow sometimes got tangled and the case was a little too small for him to carry easily. But to him that violin was a treasure. It was a gift from someone who saw his love for music and wanted to help him. It didn't matter that it wasn't fancy. It was his. He would practice every day after school. While other kids were playing outside or watching TV, he was in his room, trying to make the violin sing. Sometimes it sounded terrible. The notes were sharp or flat, and he had to stop and start over again. But he didn't give up. Every time he made a mistake, he told himself it was just a step closer to getting better. His parents weren't musicians and they didn't know much about classical music. They worked hard to support the family, and they hoped their son would find something he loved. When he showed them the violin for the first time, they smiled and encouraged him even if they didn't fully understand it. They knew that this little instrument meant a lot to him, and they wanted to help him hold on to that hope. At school, the boy wasn't very popular. He wasn't the fastest or the strongest, and he didn't always have the newest clothes or gadgets like some of the other kids. Sometimes they made fun of him for carrying a violin case instead of a basketball or video game. But he ignored the teasing. He was focused on his music, and that kept him strong. He dreamed of playing on big stages one day, not just in his neighborhood, but in places far away where people came to listen to beautiful music. He imagined the applause and the smiles of people who understood what he was doing, but for now those dreams felt far away and the journey seemed long. The boy's teachers at his old school didn't always believe in him. Some said that classical music wasn't for kids like him, or that he should try something easier. But he knew deep inside that the violin was his path, and he was ready to work hard to follow it. He didn't play for fame or money. He played because music made him feel alive. It was his way of speaking when words weren't enough. Sometimes when he was sad or scared, the violin helped him find hope. And sometimes when he was happy, the music was like a bright light shining out of him. At home, he would often play for his family. His little sister loved to listen, even if she didn't always understand the notes. She would smile and clap, and that made him feel proud. His parents would stop what they were doing and watch him play, their faces softening with pride and love. One day, his mother told him, "You have something special. Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise." Those words stayed with him. They became a shield against the doubts and the harsh words from others. Even though the boy was still young, he already knew that the world could be unfair. People might judge him by the color of his skin or where he came from. They might say he didn't belong in certain places or that he should give up on his dreams. But the violin was proof that he did belong, that he had a voice worth hearing. His practice was not easy. Sometimes his fingers hurt from holding the bow too tightly. Sometimes he struggled to read the music sheets, but he never stopped trying. Each day he got a little better. His teachers saw that, even if they didn't always say it out loud. In the evenings, when the city lights flickered and the streets grew quiet, the boy would sit by the window with his violin. He would close his eyes and play songs he made up, songs full of hope, pain, and dreams. The music was like a secret language between him and the world, one that told stories no one else could hear. His journey was just beginning, but already he was learning that music had the power to change everything. It could heal wounds, build bridges, and open doors that once seemed locked tight. And even though the road ahead would have obstacles, he was ready to face them, one note at a time. The boy was about to start a new school, one that was very different from the one he had left behind. This school was far away from his neighborhood, in a part of the city where the streets were cleaner, the buildings looked newer, and the kids seemed to have more expensive clothes and gadgets. His parents hoped this new school would give him better chances, especially in music. They believed that here, he might find teachers who really understood him and a chance to grow his talent. On his first day, the boy felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. He carried his violin case tightly like it was his most valuable treasure. The case was old and a little worn, but it held his dreams. As he walked through the hallways, he noticed that many students looked at him curiously. Some smiled politely, but others whispered to their friends, sometimes with confused or surprised faces. The boy was different from most of them, not just because of his violin, but because of where he came from and the way he dressed. When he arrived at the music room, he hoped it would feel like home. But it was quiet and a little cold. The walls were decorated with posters of famous musicians and the shelves were filled with shiny new instruments. He carried his case to the corner, trying to find a place for himself. The music teacher was a middle-aged woman who looked very serious. She watched the boy carefully as he opened his violin case. After a few moments, she said, "You can join the beginners group. We start fresh here." The boy's heart sank a little. He had been playing for years, but somehow the teacher seemed to think he was a beginner. He wanted to say, "Please listen to me first," but the words didn't come out. Instead, he nodded and went to sit with the other beginners. At first, the boy tried to learn the new music pieces the teacher gave them. But they didn't feel right. The other students around him were mostly new to the violin. Some were older kids who had just started, and some were just trying it for fun. The boy felt like he didn't belong. Sometimes when the teacher walked by, she would glance at his music and shake her head slightly. Other teachers also seemed to watch him, whispering quietly. He heard one say, "He's trying to be something he's not." That hurt more than anything else. At lunch, some students asked about his violin case. When he said he played classical music, they laughed softly. "That's not for kids like you," one of them said. The boy wanted to explain that music didn't care about where you came from or what color your skin was, but he didn't. He just smiled politely and walked away. Despite all of this, the boy didn't stop practicing. At home, he worked harder than ever. He played every day, even when his fingers ached or when he felt tired. The violin was the one place where he felt he could be himself, where the noise of the world didn't reach him. One afternoon, his mother asked gently, "Are you okay at your new school?" The boy looked down at his violin and said, "It's different. Some people don't really believe in me here." She smiled softly and said, "Sometimes people are slow to see what you can do, but that doesn't mean you should stop trying. Your music is your voice." Her words gave him strength. He decided that he would not let the whispers or the doubts stop him. He wanted to show everyone what he could really do. As weeks passed, the boy continued to attend the beginners class. He kept watching and listening to the older students in the advanced group during rehearsals. He dreamed of one day joining them. He practiced the scales and songs the teacher assigned, but also worked on harder pieces in secret, ones he had learned before. One day, the school announced a special music event, a winter recital where students could perform solos or groups on stage. The boy's heart raced when he heard about it. This was a chance to prove himself, to show that his music was real and powerful. He signed up to play a solo piece, a beautiful and emotional song he had been practicing quietly at home. But when he told the music teacher, she frowned. "That piece is too difficult for you," she said. "You should choose something easier." The boy felt his hope shake. He wanted to explain that he had been playing this music for years, but the teacher didn't listen. She insisted he pick a simpler song. For a moment, he thought about giving up, about choosing the easy way. But then he remembered his mother's words and the long hours he had spent practicing. The violin was more than just music to him. It was a part of who he was. So he spoke quietly but firmly. "I want to play this song. Please let me try." The teacher sighed but didn't argue. She said, "Okay, but if it's too hard, we might have to stop the performance." The boy felt a mix of fear and excitement. He promised himself he would not disappoint. At home, he practiced even more. He played the song slowly at first, then faster. He made mistakes, but he learned from them. Sometimes he recorded himself on his phone to listen and improve. His family watched and cheered quietly, proud of how hard he worked. The night of the recital finally arrived. The school auditorium was filled with parents, teachers, and students. The boy waited backstage, his violin case in his hands, heart pounding. He looked around at the bright lights in the audience, feeling a little small and nervous. When it was his turn, the boy stepped onto the stage. The room was silent. Some people in the crowd whispered, some looked skeptical. He could almost feel their doubts like a heavy weight. He lifted his violin and placed it under his chin. Then he began to play. The first notes were soft and slow. The music filled the room like a gentle wave, carrying feelings of hope and sadness. As the song went on, his confidence grew. His fingers moved smoothly and the melody soared. People stopped whispering. They listened. By the time he reached the last note, the room was completely quiet. Then one by one, people began to clap. The clapping grew louder and louder until the entire auditorium was filled with applause. The boy lowered his violin and looked up. Some faces in the crowd were wet with tears. The music teacher, who had doubted him, watched with surprise and respect. Other students stared in amazement. For the first time, the boy felt seen. Not because of where he came from or how he looked, but because of the music he created. The violin was no longer just his secret treasure. It was a bridge connecting him to others. After the recital, the boy's teacher came to him quietly. She said, "You played beautifully. I was wrong to doubt you." The boy smiled softly. He didn't need her apology. What mattered was that he had believed in himself. From that night on, things began to change. The music teacher moved him to the advanced group. Other students started asking questions about his music. The whispers of doubt were replaced by words of encouragement. The boy still faced challenges, but he knew one thing for sure. The violin was his voice, and no one could take that away from him. It was proof that when you believe in yourself and keep working hard, you can change the story people try to write for you. After the recital, the boy felt like something inside him had changed. The applause and the smiles made him realize that music could open doors he never thought possible. But he also knew that the journey was far from over. If anything, this was just the beginning. The next morning at school, he walked into the music room with a new sense of hope. The teacher who had doubted him before now greeted him with a nod, and the other students looked at him with a little more respect. The boy still felt the eyes on him, but this time they weren't full of doubt, they were full of curiosity. He was moved to the advanced class. It wasn't just a change in schedule. It was a change in how people saw him. In this new group, the music was harder, the pieces were longer, and the rehearsals were more serious. Some of the other students had been playing for many years, and their fingers moved effortlessly on their instruments. At first, the boy felt like he didn't belong. The notes seemed more difficult, and the music sometimes felt like a language he hadn't fully learned yet. He made mistakes, missed some cues, and felt the sting of frustration. But he reminded himself that every musician had to start somewhere, and that even the best players had once been beginners. In the quiet moments after practice, the boy would sit by himself and play the pieces over and over again. He listened carefully to recordings of professional violinists online, trying to understand the emotion behind each note. He wanted to play not just the right notes, but to tell a story with his music. Sometimes his classmates would come over and ask him about his violin. They were curious about where he got it and how long he had been playing. Slowly, some of them began to see him as more than just the boy from the neighborhood with a violin case. One day, during a break, a classmate asked, "How do you get your bow to sound like that?" "I've never heard anyone play like you." The boy smiled, happy to share what he knew. He talked about practice, patience, and never giving up. The classmates listened carefully, and from that day on, they started to see him as a serious musician. Outside of school, the boy's life was not always easy. Sometimes people in his neighborhood didn't understand his love for classical music. Some thought it was strange for a kid like him to play the violin. They said it wasn't real music or that he should play something more popular like hip-hop or rap. But the boy knew that music had no limits. It didn't care about labels or expectations. It was a way to express feelings that words could not. At home, his family was proud but also worried. They wanted him to have a bright future, but also hoped he would stay safe in a world that sometimes felt uncertain. His parents reminded him to stay focused, work hard, and be kind to others. The boy listened to their advice, but he also knew that music was his path. It was the way he could rise above the challenges and find peace. As the months passed, the boy grew stronger in his music and more confident in himself. He began to enter small competitions and community performances. Each time he played, he learned something new: how to control his nerves, how to connect with the audience, and how to let his feelings flow through the strings. His violin became more than just an instrument. It became a part of his identity. It told the world who he was and what he stood for. At school, some teachers who had been skeptical started to come to his performances. They saw the passion in his playing and the way he inspired others. Slowly, the walls of judgment and doubt began to crumble. But not everyone was ready to accept the boy's talent. Some students still whispered behind his back or made jokes when they thought he wasn't listening. Sometimes he overheard comments about how classical music wasn't for people like him. Those words stung deeply. When that happened, the boy would take a deep breath, close his eyes, and remember the feeling of the violin in his hands. He thought about the long nights of practice, the smiles of his family, and the moment on stage when the room went silent. That memory gave him strength. He decided he would not let negativity stop him. Instead, he used it as fuel to work harder, to improve his skills, and to show the world the true power of music. One afternoon, the school announced an opportunity to audition for a prestigious youth orchestra. It was a chance for the boy to play with some of the best young musicians in the city and to learn from experienced teachers. The boy was excited, but nervous. He knew the competition would be tough. Many students had expensive instruments, years of training, and strong support from their families. But he believed in himself and in the music he carried in his heart. He practiced the audition piece every day. He worked on every detail: the tempo, the tone, the emotion. He asked his music teacher for advice and listened carefully to her feedback. Sometimes he felt tired and frustrated, but he reminded himself why he started this journey. The day of the audition arrived. The boy woke up early, dressed carefully, and carried his violin case with pride. At the audition hall, he saw other students warming up, some looking confident, others anxious. When it was his turn, he stepped onto the stage, took a deep breath, and began to play. The music flowed from his violin like a story. It spoke of hope, struggle, and dreams. His fingers moved with skill and feeling. The notes filled the room, capturing the attention of the judges and the audience. When he finished, the room was silent for a moment. Then the judges smiled and nodded. The boy felt a warm glow inside. No matter the result, he had given his best. A few days later, the school announced the results. The boy's name was on the list. He had been accepted into the youth orchestra. This was a dream come true. Joining the orchestra meant new challenges and new friends. It meant more practice and more chances to grow. It also meant proving once again that talent and passion can break barriers. At the first rehearsal, the boy felt nervous but excited. The other musicians welcomed him warmly, and the conductor encouraged him to share his ideas. As they played together, the boy felt a deep connection to the music, to his fellow players, and to the future he was building. Through music, he found a way to express his true self. He showed the world that dreams don't have limits and that sometimes the quietest voices can create the loudest songs. The boy's journey was still unfolding. There would be challenges ahead, but now he knew that with courage, determination, and the power of music, he could face anything. The boy had joined the youth orchestra, and this new chapter brought excitement but also new challenges. The orchestra was filled with talented young musicians who had been playing for many years, many of them with access to great teachers and expensive instruments. The boy's violin was still old and worn, but he loved it as much as ever. It carried his dreams and memories, and he refused to let anything stop him from playing his best. At the first rehearsal, the boy felt a mix of nerves and excitement. He was surrounded by so many new faces, all focused on the music and ready to work hard. The conductor was kind but serious, explaining that the orchestra had important concerts coming up, and everyone had to give their best. The music they were going to play was beautiful but difficult. It demanded attention to detail, teamwork, and practice. The boy listened carefully, following the notes and watching the conductor's movements. Sometimes he felt overwhelmed. The pace was fast and the pieces were complicated. But the boy remembered everything he had learned so far about patience, persistence, and believing in himself. He decided that even if it was hard, he would not give up. After rehearsal, some of the other players came over to introduce themselves. A few were surprised to see him there. One asked, "How long have you been playing?" The boy smiled and said quietly, "Since I was very young." They nodded, impressed, and some even said they had heard about his recital at school. Slowly, he began to feel like part of the group. At home, the boy's family noticed the changes too. He was more tired in the evenings, practicing long hours to keep up with the orchestra. Sometimes he came home frustrated when a piece didn't sound right or when he missed a note. But his parents and sister encouraged him, reminding him that every great musician faces struggles. One night after a tough practice, the boy sat alone in his room with his violin. He thought about how far he had come, from the first scratchy notes on his old instrument to playing with the youth orchestra. But he also thought about the challenges ahead. He knew that music was not just about notes on a page or perfect technique. It was about feeling, about telling a story, about connecting with others through sound. With that thought, he picked up his violin and began to play a soft melody. The music filled the room, calming his mind and lifting his spirit. The days passed quickly as rehearsals continued. The orchestra prepared for a big concert at a well-known theater in the city. The boy worked hard, practicing every chance he got. Sometimes he stayed late after school, asking the conductor for extra help. One afternoon during rehearsal, the conductor stopped the music suddenly. He looked directly at the boy and said, "Your playing has improved a lot, but I want you to focus on your expression. It's not just about hitting the right notes. You need to make the audience feel what you feel." The boy nodded, feeling both challenged and inspired. He knew this was the next step, to move beyond technical skill and into true artistry. He began to listen more closely to the music, imagining the stories behind the notes. He thought about the struggles he had faced, the people who had doubted him, and the joy he felt when his violin sang. Slowly, his playing changed. It became richer, more powerful. When he performed, people could feel the emotions behind every phrase. The day of the concert arrived. The theater was beautiful and filled with an eager audience. The boy felt butterflies in his stomach, but also a strong sense of purpose. He had worked hard for this moment and he was ready. Backstage, he looked around at the other musicians. They were nervous too, but they smiled and encouraged each other. The boy felt proud to be among them. When the conductor raised his baton, the orchestra began to play. The music filled the theater, moving through the audience like a wave of sound. The boy's violin rose and fell, carrying the story of the piece, carrying its joys, its sorrows, its hope. As he played, he remembered everything that had brought him here. The old violin in his neighborhood, the doubting teachers, the long nights of practice. All those moments had shaped him and made this music possible. When the final note faded, the audience erupted in applause. The boy's heart swelled with pride and happiness. He had done it. After the concert, many people came to congratulate him. Some teachers at school smiled with respect. Other students gave him high fives. For the first time, he felt that he truly belonged in this world of music. But even with the success, the boy knew that his journey was far from over. There were still many challenges ahead. He wanted to keep growing, to keep learning, to keep sharing his music. In the weeks that followed, the boy began to think about what music meant to him beyond the stage. He started visiting local community centers and after-school programs, offering to play for younger kids. He wanted to show them that music was for everyone, no matter where they came from or what others said. At one center, a small group of children gathered around him, eyes wide with wonder as he played his violin. Some of them had never seen the instrument before. The boy explained how music could help them tell their own stories, just like it had helped him. He saw hope in their faces, hope that maybe they too could find a way to rise above challenges and create something beautiful. The boy's music began to reach beyond his own world. It became a bridge, connecting him with others and inspiring those who needed it most. One day, a local newspaper wrote an article about the boy and his journey. They talked about how he had faced doubts and stereotypes, but kept pushing forward with courage and passion. The article was shared online, and soon people from all over the city were talking about him. The boy's story touched many hearts. Some people offered support, donations for a new violin, invitations to perform, and words of encouragement. Others simply said, "Thank you for showing us what's possible." Through it all, the boy stayed humble. He knew that the violin was not just about him. It was about the music, the stories, and the people who believed in him. As the seasons changed, the boy kept practicing, performing, and dreaming. He knew that music would always be his guide, a light in the darkest times and a celebration in the brightest moments. He wasn't just a boy with a violin anymore. He was a voice for hope, a symbol of perseverance, and a reminder that sometimes the most beautiful songs come from the most unexpected places. After the big concert and the attention that followed, the boy's life began to change in ways he never expected. It wasn't just about playing music anymore. It was about what the music could do for him and the people around him. The journey had started with a violin in his hands and a heart full of hope, but now it was growing into something much bigger. School became a different place. The whispers and doubtful looks that once followed him were quieter. More students said hello in the hallways or asked about his music. Some even came to watch him play during school events. The boy noticed these small changes and felt a warm glow inside. But he also knew that not everything would be easy from now on. One day, the boy was invited to speak to a group of younger students at a local school. The principal had heard about him and wanted the kids to hear his story. Not just about music, but about never giving up, no matter what others say. The boy felt nervous at first. He wasn't used to speaking in front of a crowd, especially not about himself. But as he looked at the faces of the children waiting to listen, he felt a new kind of strength. He started by talking about the violin, how it was his friend during hard times, how it helped him express feelings he couldn't put into words. He told them about the challenges he faced, the teachers who doubted him, the kids who laughed, and the moments he wanted to give up. But then he shared how he kept going, how he practiced every day, how he believed in himself, and how music became his voice. The children listened quietly, some with wide eyes, some nodding slowly. Afterward, many came up to thank him, asking questions about how to start playing or how to keep going when things are hard. The boy realized that his story wasn't just about him. It was about inspiring others to find their own voices, whatever those might be. Around this time, the boy's family noticed something else changing too. His confidence was growing. He spoke more openly about his dreams and plans for the future. The violin wasn't just a hobby anymore. It was becoming a path he wanted to follow for the rest of his life. But with bigger dreams came bigger challenges. The boy knew that music required more than just passion and practice. It needed resources. Good teachers, quality instruments, opportunities to perform and support. His family did their best to help, but money was tight. The old violin, while special, sometimes made it harder for him to reach the sounds he wanted. They saved every penny, hoping to find a better instrument, but it was difficult. Still, the boy refused to let this stop him. He played with all his heart, making the old violin sing in ways no one expected. His talent and determination caught the attention of a local music store owner, who offered to lend him a nicer violin for important performances. This kind gesture was a turning point. With the new violin, the boy felt his music reach new heights. The strings responded better, the sound was richer, and he could express even more emotions. He didn't forget the old violin, though. It was the one that had carried him through the hardest times. He kept it safe, a reminder of where he had started and how far he had come. As the boy continued to grow, he faced more opportunities to showcase his music. He was invited to join workshops with professional musicians, attend summer music camps, and even travel to nearby cities for competitions. Each new experience brought excitement, but also nerves. The boy was often the only one from his background in these spaces. Sometimes he felt out of place, wondering if he truly belonged. But every time doubt crept in, he remembered why he started. He thought about the moments when music had saved him, when the violin's notes had been a light in dark times. He worked harder, practiced longer, and pushed himself to learn more. One summer at a music camp, the boy met a teacher who changed the way he thought about music. This teacher didn't just focus on technique, but on storytelling and emotion. She encouraged the boy to find his own style and to let his life experiences shape his music. The boy listened closely. He realized that music wasn't just about playing notes perfectly. It was about sharing who he was. With this new understanding, he began to explore different styles and sounds. He mixed classical pieces with rhythms and melodies inspired by the music from his neighborhood. This unique blend made his performances even more special. When he played, people could feel the story of a boy who had faced doubt and found hope, a boy who had turned challenges into music. Back home, the boy's family was proud but also worried about the pressures he faced. They reminded him to take care of himself and to remember that success wasn't only about applause or awards. It was about happiness and growth. The boy nodded, knowing they were right. He took time to rest, to spend with family and friends, and to remember why he loved music in the first place. One evening, after a long day of practice, the boy sat with his family around the dinner table. They talked about dreams and future plans. His parents asked what he wanted to do next. The boy smiled and said, "I want to keep playing. I want to share my music with more people. And I want to help other kids like me find their own voices." His family smiled, knowing that no matter what happened, the boy's heart was full of kindness and courage. As the months turned into years, the boy's music journey continued. He faced new challenges, but each time he found a way forward. The violin was no longer just an instrument. It was a part of who he was, a symbol of hope, strength, and dreams. He never forgot where he started, and he always remembered the power of believing in himself. The boy's story was not just about music. It was about the courage to rise above doubt, the strength to keep going, and the magic that happens when you let your true voice be heard. The boy's journey with music was growing in many ways, and every day brought new experiences. He was learning that music wasn't just about playing notes or winning competitions. It was about connection, with himself, with others, and with the world around him. One thing the boy learned early on was that the path to success is rarely easy or straight. Sometimes it twists and turns, bringing unexpected challenges and lessons. After his summer music camp and the new lessons he learned there, the boy returned to school feeling more confident. He started sharing his music in new places, not just on stage or in the orchestra, but in community centers, local events, and even small neighborhood gatherings. One afternoon, he was invited to play at a local park during a weekend festival. It was a small event, but the boy felt excited. This was a chance to bring music to people who might not go to concerts or music halls. As he played under the open sky, the sound of his violin floated over the crowd. Children stopped running to listen. Adults paused their conversations. Some people closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. After the performance, a few people came up to thank him. One woman said, "You brought something special here today. It's like you gave us all a moment of peace." The boy smiled, feeling happy and proud. Moments like these reminded him why he loved music so much. It wasn't about fame or prizes. It was about touching hearts. Back at school, the boy kept working hard. His teachers noticed his progress, and some who had doubted him before now supported him more openly. They could see his dedication and the way music was helping him grow. Still, not every day was easy. The boy sometimes felt tired, balancing schoolwork, rehearsals, and family life. There were days when his fingers hurt from practicing too much or when he worried about upcoming performances. One evening, after a long day, he sat with his violin on his lap, feeling frustrated. He had been trying to master a difficult piece for weeks, but it just wouldn't sound right. His mother noticed and came to sit beside him. She didn't say much at first, just watched him struggle. Then she said softly, "It's okay to take a break. Sometimes when we push too hard, the music can get lost." The boy nodded and put the violin down for a while. They talked about how important it was to be kind to himself, just like he was kind to others. This moment taught the boy that taking care of his mind and body was part of being a good musician. Music was about balance, practice, yes, but also rest and joy. As time passed, the boy's skills improved, and so did his confidence. He began to dream bigger. He wanted to perform in bigger venues, maybe even travel to other cities or countries to share his music. One day, his music teacher told him about a scholarship program for young musicians. It was a chance to study at a prestigious music school with great teachers and many resources. The boy was excited, but also nervous. He knew the competition would be tough. Many students had trained their whole lives for this chance, but he didn't let fear stop him. He practiced harder than ever, focusing on the pieces he would play for the audition. He asked for advice, took extra lessons, and worked on expressing emotion through his music. The day of the audition came, and the boy felt a familiar mix of nerves and hope. He walked into the room, saw the judges, and took a deep breath. As he played, he poured everything he had into the music. He thought about his journey, the early days with the old violin, the doubts, the hard work, and the joy he found in every note. When he finished, the room was quiet for a moment, then the judges smiled and nodded. A few weeks later, the boy received a letter. He had been accepted. The scholarship would cover his studies and give him a chance to grow like never before. This was a dream come true, but it also meant changes. The boy would have to leave his neighborhood, his family, and his school for a while. He would face new challenges in a new environment. He was excited but also scared. His parents and family were proud but worried too. They reminded him to stay strong, to work hard, but also to remember who he was and where he came from. The boy promised he would. At the new school, the boy found himself surrounded by talented musicians from all over. The environment was very different from what he was used to. Some students came from families with deep musical traditions, had the best instruments and years of private lessons. At first, the boy felt small and out of place. He wondered if he really belonged, but he remembered the lessons he had learned: to believe in himself, to work hard, and to use his own story as strength. He made friends with a few students who shared his passion for music. They practiced together, helped each other, and learned from their different backgrounds. The boy's teachers noticed his unique style and the emotion he brought to his playing. They encouraged him to keep exploring his own voice. School was demanding. The boy had long days of classes, rehearsals, and practice. Sometimes he felt homesick. He missed his family, his neighborhood, and the familiar comfort of his old violin. But he also felt proud. He was growing not just as a musician, but as a person. One afternoon during a solo rehearsal, the boy played a piece that reminded him of home, a song filled with hope and struggle. As he played, tears came to his eyes. The teacher saw this and said gently, "Music is powerful. It connects us to our feelings, our memories. Never be afraid to feel it deeply." The boy nodded. He realized that music was not just a skill or a career. It was a way to heal, to connect, and to grow. Over time, the boy's talent blossomed. He performed in recitals, won awards, and earned respect from his peers and teachers. But more importantly, he stayed true to himself. He used his music to tell his story of a boy who faced doubt, worked hard, and found his voice. Even as his world grew bigger, he never forgot the power of a simple violin, a small community, and a heart full of hope. Through music, the boy showed that dreams don't have limits. With courage, passion, and belief in oneself, anything is possible. The boy's world was changing faster than he ever imagined. The scholarship had opened new doors, but with new opportunities came new pressures. Every day felt like a test, not just of his musical skills, but of his heart and spirit. At the new school, the boy met many students who had been playing music since they were very young. Some came from families of musicians, and they seemed confident and skilled. Sometimes, when he saw how easily they played, the boy felt a flicker of doubt. He asked himself, "Am I really good enough? Can I keep up with them?" These thoughts were hard to shake, but the boy had learned something important over the years. Everyone struggles sometimes, even those who look confident. Instead of giving up, he reminded himself of how far he had come. He remembered the long hours spent practicing in his small room, the times when people had doubted him, and the power music had to make him feel alive. With that thought, he picked up his violin and practiced even more. But this time it wasn't just about playing perfectly. It was about playing with feeling. His teachers noticed this change. They said his music had grown deeper, full of emotion and story. They encouraged him to keep sharing his unique voice. At school, the boy joined a small group of students who loved exploring different kinds of music. They mixed classical pieces with jazz, folk, and songs from their own cultures. This group became like a second family. They supported each other, shared ideas, and laughed over mistakes. The boy loved these moments. They reminded him that music was about connection, not competition. One day, the boy's music teacher gave the group a special project: create a new piece of music together that told a story from their lives. The boy thought carefully. He wanted to share the story of his journey, the struggles, the hope, and the power of music to change everything. He spent nights writing notes, experimenting with sounds, and practicing until the music felt just right. When the group performed the piece at a school concert, the audience was silent, hanging on every note. The boy's violin told a story of challenge and courage, and by the end, many people had tears in their eyes. After the performance, a music critic who had come to watch approached the boy and said, "Your music moves people because it's honest. Keep telling your story. This praise filled the boy with pride and motivation. It reminded him that music was not just about technique or awards, it was about truth. Outside of school, the boy stayed connected to his family and community. He often thought about the old violin that had started it all, and the teachers who had once doubted him. He wanted to give back. He began volunteering at a local after-school program, teaching younger children how to play instruments. Many of these kids came from neighborhoods like his own, with few resources and big dreams. The boy remembered how important it was to have someone believe in you, to have the chance to try. He worked patiently with the children, encouraging them and helping them find joy in music. Watching their faces light up when they played a new song reminded the boy why he loved music so much. It was more than just sound. It was hope, a way to rise above difficulties. At home, the boy's family noticed how much he had changed. He was more confident, kind, and focused, but he was still humble and grateful. One evening during dinner, his parents asked him about his dreams for the future. The boy smiled and said, "I want to keep playing, keep learning. But more than that, I want to help others find their music, their voice." His family nodded, proud of the young person he was becoming. But life wasn't without challenges. The boy sometimes felt lonely or overwhelmed. The pressure to succeed, the distance from home, and the constant work could weigh on him. There were moments when he missed the simplicity of his old neighborhood and the comfort of familiar faces. During one difficult week, the boy struggled with a new, complex piece of music. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't get it right. Frustrated, he put down his violin and took a walk outside. As he walked through the city streets, he noticed a group of children playing in a small park. They laughed and sang, their joy simple and pure. The boy sat on a bench and closed his eyes. He thought about what music really meant to him, not perfection but connection. He decided then to change his approach. Instead of trying to play the piece perfectly, he would focus on the feelings behind it. The next day when he practiced, everything was different. The music flowed from his heart and suddenly the notes made sense. This was a turning point. The boy realized that music, like life, was not about being perfect but about being real. Over time, the boy's hard work and honesty in music brought him more opportunities. He was invited to perform at community events, charity concerts, and even on local radio. Each performance was a chance to share his story and inspire others. Through it all, the boy stayed connected to the lessons he had learned in his neighborhood: courage, kindness, and the power of believing in yourself. One evening, after a performance, a young listener approached him. The child said, "I want to play the violin too, but I'm scared. How do you keep going when things are hard?" The boy smiled and replied, "It's okay to be scared. I am too. But if you love music, let it be your strength. Practice, be patient with yourself, and never give up." The child nodded, eyes shining with hope. That moment reminded the boy why he kept playing: to give hope, to share strength, and to show that music can change lives. As the boy looked ahead, he knew the journey was far from over. There would be more challenges, more moments of doubt, but also more growth and joy. With his violin in hand and a heart full of dreams, the boy was ready for whatever came next, because he had learned that true music comes from the soul, and that soul belongs to anyone brave enough to believe in themselves. The boy's journey with music had come a long way. From the first moments when teachers doubted him and the violin felt heavy in his hands, to the days he stood on stage moving people to tears. Every step had shaped him. Now, he was standing at a new beginning. The lessons he had learned, the people who believed in him, and the strength he had found inside were guiding him toward the future. One morning, the boy woke up feeling a quiet excitement. He had been invited to perform at a big event, a celebration for young artists from many backgrounds, sharing their talents and stories. This was more than just a concert. It was a chance to show the world who he was and what music could do. As he prepared for the day, he thought about everything that had brought him here: the struggles, the practice, the moments when he almost gave up but didn't. He packed his violin carefully and headed to the venue. When he arrived, the place was buzzing with energy. Artists were rehearsing, talking, and sharing their excitement. The boy felt a mix of nerves and pride. Backstage, he met other young musicians, singers, dancers, painters, all with stories like his own, stories of hope, courage, and dreams. When it was his turn to perform, the boy walked onto the stage. The lights were bright and the audience was large, but he felt calm. This was his moment. He raised his violin, took a deep breath, and began to play. The music flowed from him like a river, strong, clear, full of feeling. Every note told a part of his story. The pain of being doubted, the joy of discovery, the hope for the future. As the last note faded, the room was silent for a heartbeat. Then the applause started, soft at first, then growing louder and louder. Tears came to the boy's eyes, not because of the applause, but because he had shared his truth, and it had reached so many hearts. After the performance, people came up to him. Some told him how moved they were. Others said his music had inspired them to follow their own dreams. The boy smiled, feeling a warmth he had never known before. That night, as he rested, he thought about the journey that had brought him here. It hadn't been easy. There had been times when the world seemed against him. But music had been his light, a way to shine even in the darkest moments. In the weeks that followed, the boy's story began to spread. Local newspapers wrote about him. More invitations to perform came in. He was asked to speak at schools and community centers about his journey. The boy welcomed these chances. He wanted to give back, to remind others that no matter where they come from or what others say, their dreams matter. One day, while visiting a school, the boy sat with a group of children. One little girl raised her hand and asked, "How did you keep going when people didn't believe in you?" The boy looked at her and said simply, "I believed in myself even when others didn't. I found something I loved and held on to it. That made all the difference." The children listened carefully, and some smiled with hope in their eyes. Through these moments, the boy realized that his music was more than sound. It was a message, a gift, a bridge to others. Back home, his family was proud but reminded him to stay grounded. They knew the road ahead would have challenges. The boy agreed. He understood that success wasn't a finish line but a journey. He kept practicing, learning and growing. Sometimes, when the world felt overwhelming, he returned to the simple joy of music, playing for himself, for his family, or in quiet moments under the sky. These times reminded him of the boy he once was, curious, hopeful, ready to face whatever came next. As the years passed, the boy's music reached more people. He recorded songs, played at festivals, and even started teaching others who wanted to learn. He never forgot his old violin, the one that had carried him through the hardest times. It sat in a special place in his home, a symbol of where he began. Looking back, the boy knew that music had saved him. It had given him strength, confidence, and a voice when he needed one most. But more than that, it had taught him the power of belief, in oneself and in the dreams that live inside. Now, the boy was ready to help others find their music, their voice, and their hope. Because he had learned that no matter where you start with courage and heart, you can create something beautiful. And that is a story worth sharing.